Welcome everybody. I will give you a short introduction with some slides, and then we will have special guests. First of all, Vice Mayor Kozakaya from the city of Amersfoort, and then we get a lecture from Eddy Hartog. Excuse me. But first, some slides. Let's see how I share them over here. Oops. Do you see my slides?
Yes.
Great. So welcome to the online mission to the EU. We have people from all around the world. So for us it's a short flight, but for some other people it's more longer. And I have a question to everybody. Please mute your mics so we don't hear your dogs and cats and washing machines in the background. And if you don't, Wendelijn will mute you. So the question for today is what can we learn from the European Union? But we also do online missions to other parts of the world. Like last week we went to Korea. Next week we go to New York City. Next week we go to India, and the week after we go to New York City, and we will have a final destination in China as well. And so my name is Jan-Willem Westlink. I'm program manager at the Future City Foundation, and we organize these online missions together with the Netherlands Enterprise Agency to fill the gap of missions which are no longer available because of the COVID crisis. And we're not alone. We are with people from all around the world, which you can see here in this beautiful lineup of flags. There are some rules on WebEx which are nice to apply, and this is that it's good to mute your mic during the meeting. It's possible to ask questions. You can use the chat box for it. The chat box you can find in the bottom bar of your screen. And afterwards we do a Q&A with the questions. You can ask questions to everybody, then use the address them to everyone, and you can also send a personal message to one of the attendees. And it's also nice if you introduce yourself at that chat box. If you say who you are and where you're from and what you're doing, something like that. And it's polite to not talk when other people talk. Now, everything can go wrong in life, also here. So if you don't hear anything, there's something wrong with your audio. You have to click join with computer audio. You can see all participants in one screen. There's a button, there's a button here somewhere where you can do that. And if other people don't hear you, there's something wrong with your mic or your video. So the Future City Foundation, short introduction, is a movement of communities. And in that movement of communities, we are connected to the Fireware Foundation. And we are an official Fireware iHub. So we connect Europe with the Dutch community. And what we do is partner science, in which we combine public and the private sector. And we bridge the gap between the smart part and the city part of the smart city community. And the big question we're focusing at is how cities, villages, and regions are changing because of digitization and technologization. And we focus on the how question. So how do we arrange that? By public administration, technical, by politics, and by urban planning. And for that last question, we are also connected to the Dutch Urban Agenda. And the Dutch Urban Agenda is a program of the Ministry of the Interior, in which several questions on several topics related to innovation in the city are addressed. And that can be social questions, it can be questions also There are new questions on the 6 feet society, but we focus on the question, what tools do we need in the smart city? And we start with some designing principles, which we collected in a book we made last year. And now we are collecting, developing, testing, and implementing new tools. We collect them, and if you want to, and we do that with a bunch of partners in the coming 3 years. And we create network, knowledge development, and media attention. And this is supported, as said, by the Ministry of the Interior and the G40. And if you want to know more, you can scan this QR code and then you go to the website, which is related to that. And Wendelijn will also address links in the chat box, and you get a mail afterwards in which those links are collected, and they are also published on our website. So there's plenty of reasons to find them, plenty of ways. The question for today is what can we learn from Europe? And if you want to know more from that, you can, there are several EU instruments you can see, and these are also collected at the website. You can go, you can use the Horizon 2020 program, the Eureka program. This slides I got from the ministry. And if you want to have support on that, you can contact the RVO for the Dutch part. And if you're from another country, you can go to your national contact point to find more information on it. And yeah, there's the program. And so this is my part of the presentation. And if you want to know more or contact me, please scan this QR code. Or you find it also in the chat. And then we go to the important part of today, and that's the rest of the program. And I will stop sharing my screen so we can give the floor to the Vice Mayor of the city of Amersfoort, Fatma Kozakaya, and then we get a lecture by Eddy Hartog, and he is head of the unit Smart Mobility and Living at the European Commission. And then there's time for questions, and we have a little tradition that Lotte Nijland, she's the deal maker at the Urban Agenda, always gets the floor for the first question. If you want to get in contact with our three guests, you can easily scan these QR codes. So there's a lot of codes to scan or find it in the aftermail. And I now give the floor to Fatma.
Thank you. Thank you, Jan Willem, for inviting me to open this online get-together with an interesting program about the direction in which Europe, its cities and communities can develop. And I feel like the world is in my workroom at this moment. This coronavirus we all live in at this moment, this situation, learns a lot of things. One of them is joining worldwide like this with each other. So that's a good development. But welcome also to all participants. My name is Fatma Kozakaya, and I'm Vice Mayor in the city of Amersfoort, in the center of the Netherlands, a beautiful city. You should come and visit us sometime. Amersfoort was among the first cities to sign the Porto Declaration. We signed the declaration because of the importance of cooperation in the digital transformation and both the challenges and opportunities it poses. Cooperation not just on the level of the EU and its member states, but very much also among citizens and communities, which I find very important in this data world. All over Europe and the rest of the world, cities develop digital and technological solutions for mobility, healthcare, housing, education, participation, sustainability, and so on. not just local governments, but companies, organizations, and individual citizens as well. Innovation and other innovatives often start within our communities. And that's very important. Exchange of all this innovative, creative happening in our communities is needed to effectively steer the places we live and work in the right direction towards sustainable and smart cities. Scorewater is an example I often proudly mention. It is a Horizon 2020 innovation project on smart water management. Scorewater focuses on how to deal with interchanging periods of water scarcity and surplus caused by urbanization and climate change. The project is a cooperation between Barcelona, Gothenburg, and Amersfoort. In Amersfoort, that's very important. Part of this project is focused on citizen participation. That's very new. Eventually, the knowledge, data, and tools that are collected and developed in this project will be made available to other cities. I've used Corewater as an example on many occasions because I think we need more of these types of projects, connecting knowledge and talents of different parts of the world and sharing it. Europe has a very important role in this too. Amersfoort and its innovative sectors have much to offer, and I know other cities like yours do too. We have a lot to learn from each other, and we create synergy as we do. It is why I am a passionate believer in the principles of the Porto Declaration. I hope the upcoming program inspires all of you. I can't be at this meeting all of the time. I would love to hear other people speaking about this very important topic, but I have another meeting after this. So I will leave the meeting. And I was assured by Willem-Jan that I could listen to this and I could get a link and learn about the other participants and hear their questions and answers on this question. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening, midday.
Thank you, Fatma. And we will, of course, send you a WhatsApp with a link to the YouTube so you can watch it wherever you want. And that's also for the other people. It will be at our website, as said, all the other links. You ended your little introduction with the Porto Declaration. That's a beautiful bridge to Eddy Hartog. So Eddy, the floor is yours to give to lead us through the wonderful world of Europe.
Thank you very much, Jan Willem, and thank you very much, Fatma, for the introduction as well. I think Wendelijn will share some of the slides that I prepared. And what I would like to do, because we only have 15 minutes as a first introduction, to go very quickly from the generic to the specific, because my job is as one of the heads of units dealing with smart cities. You will see in the commission there's various heads of units dealing with smart cities. I do it from DG Connect, the telecoms and the ICT angle, but there's various people working on that. And if you then look at the way smart cities are, they are various angles. You find various definitions, you find beautiful slides, you find beautiful designs to present the smart cities, and you can't do everything in one session. Yeah, if you go to the second one, Wendelijn, thank you. You see that what we approach this from an urban policy, a city planning type of thing. My job is to look at it from the tech angle. Other people look at it from how do you construct buildings. The next one looks at it from purely R&I. I think you mentioned already the Horizon programs that we have. Originally, my unit came in it from the energy, the water, and the mobility policy angle, so from sector policies. I think what's important is what Fatma just said is about what we do this in the end for. In the end, we don't do this just to amuse ourselves with technology, but we do this to give better services to our citizens locally, and also create a better working environment for our businesses so that they can innovate and can they deliver better to their clients. That is really what we are doing. And that is a very broad context. You can spend about 2 days explaining the various different European Union angles, both at Commission level, but also with member states. I won't do that. I will try to go quickly to the theme of today, which is about the urban data plan. So if you go to the next slide, it gives you an overview of what is and what is not happening. You will see some initiatives. I refer to a Green Digital Charter. I refer to the Urban Agenda. You see a reference to the Digital Cities Challenge, now the Intelligent Cities Challenge. Some of you are familiar with Horizon exercises under what is labeled there the EIP FCC, European Innovation Partnership on Smart Cities and Communities. These then deliver guides, manuals, good practices. You see a number of the examples there, and we try to be concrete. I saw that Albert Engels is also on the call, so welcome, Albert. But one of the things that we've tried to do is, for example, if we all start funding lampposts with that are going to be smart and not only providing light, but also environment sensors, 5G, and then all those sort of things, we might as well try to bring that together European-wide, both in terms of technology, by standards, but maybe also by market aggregation. So there's a whole plethora of initiatives in the European Union that we are facilitating through different funding streams and through different policy angles. I think what you showed, Jan Willem, was maybe one of the elements really focusing on the research and development. We now would also like to do that with the Digital Europe program. The elements, for example, in the Connected Europe facilities, where over the last couple of years we've tried to plug gaps where there was no Wi-Fi through voucher schemes. We've tried to actually make sure that all the people have the Wi-Fi. We will extend that also into the 5G. But from that sort of generic scene setting, I would like to go to something very specific that we discovered. And that's the next slide. And I will give you 3 slides of how to present the reason why we do what we do. And the first slide, it actually comes from the Erasmus Center of Data Analytics, is to see, well, if you build that ecosystem, as European Union, we are not going to be responsible for issuing passports or giving mobility services in cities. Cities are well able to do that along to their own desires, the wishes of their own citizens. That's not the European Union remit, if you like. The urban policy is local, to a certain extent national, but not a European Union core business to go into all sorts of detail. What we can do, and for example, the discussion on the health app shows what we can do, and they say like, well, maybe we can develop certain things in common. Even though the apps might in the end remain national, we can do that according to common principles and a common starting point. If you have that starting point, at the heart of that is sharing of data and the quality of the data and the technology that you use to gather this data. That is why in this slide, this Center for Data Analytics, not surprisingly, put the urban data platforms at the heart of what we are going to do. Then look at the next slide. That is a sort of in-house presentation of the same thing. That gives you a rather detailed view, and I won't go through all the details, you will have the slides. But this is the internal conversation that we have had in the unit and in the commission. So like, well, what can we actually do? If you want to have ultimately the services delivered to the citizens and the business creating opportunities, you first of all need to make sure that everyone is connected. We had a whole discussion about Wi-Fi, 4G, we're now moving into 5G. You need to make sure that everyone is connected. And then you need to make sure that everyone is on the same data platform, that data can actually work together. This is where we have developed a number of initiatives about open data, and now culminating in a vision on common data spaces for various themes, but also, and that is what we will be doing, on a common data space for smart cities. Now, that's not the theme of today. We can have another session on let's say, the data management. If you don't have the data, you also need to make sure that these data can actually work together. And that is where the theme of today, the digital urban platforms or the urban data platforms come in, where you actually need to make sure that you have the same language, let's call it that way. Now, in computer terms, they translate it into ontology, and that's also where fireware comes in terms of standard setting. Fireware is one of those technologies. It's a level deeper than what we are looking at, but it's one of those technologies that follows a certain ontology that fits into an overall ecosystem, meaning that not everyone using fireware can still communicate with people doing fireware. It's one of those tools that will be able to work with us. And that is the sector integration through these common data spaces and the urban data platforms that allows you to have a de-siloing of your city map. The last slide is then a slide that brings us back to the smart cities and the homes. Again, it's to emphasize first of all, that we're doing this for a purpose. I mean, Fatma mentioned the water, but also waste management, energy management, transport management. A lot of this now becomes intertwined. You can't do smart mobility without having a proper smart energy management or having the buildings deployed in the right way or having, let's say, a whole city management platform. And you find in cities that is often still compartmentalized. Each of the sectors have developed their own platforms in their own ways. And if you ask the energy department to communicate with the environment department, they say, well, actually, we can't really because we decided to go different paths 10, 20 years ago. So that is really what we saw, the analysis that we had in the work done so far in a number of European projects that haven't been mentioned, that I will mention on the Horizon Europe program. We had a project called Espresso. We had a project called Synchronicity that actually made the city say, well, actually, we need to do something about this. Now, the problem is that in the European Union, we don't have the billions necessary to give everyone the proper IT infrastructure. This needs to be done bottom up with cities. So the trick then is how do you get 80,000 municipalities in Europe to do the same thing, and also not only to do the same thing, but also in a way that we maintain our technical sovereignty, that as a city, that we don't lock ourselves into one vendor, because there are a number of, let's say, big suppliers that would easily take over your city in terms of data management. They would then own the data and they would manage it, and you would not necessarily have the full control anymore. So that is why we decided we need to develop something else. And then if you go to the next slide, that is where the analysis then got in a way stuck. So the Erasmus Center for Data Analytics did a study financed by one of the projects in the European Union, where we said, well, who has these urban data platforms? Do we actually have them? So there are actually a large number of European cities that have deployed this. 70% actually use open standards. It also means that 30% do not use open standards. That's also telling. 50% strive for interoperable platforms. Others don't even do that, but they don't have that. So you see that the choice of technology and the compartmentalization of the solutions found is still a problem in the European Union. I speak about the European Union. It's probably the same problem in some of the other cities across the world, but let's say my remit is the European Union. But this analysis is very much shared by the others. So talking this through with representatives of the cities, we came to a conclusion, that is the next slide, that we need to do something about this. We need to make sure that we actually we need to bring all the European cities into the same family. So what we need to do is we need to accelerate the urban data platforms in European cities. And then the ambition that we set for ourselves is to say at least 2/3 of the European population should be covered by the same urban data platforms, at least the same family of urban platforms. Fireware can play a role in that, but it's not an absolute requirement. I come to some of the technical aspects later on. So that was, if you like, the political ambition that with the representatives from the cities we shared. We said, okay, what can we do then about this? Apart from continuing the work that we have been doing so far by sharing standards, making them interoperable, funding projects, continuing testing, also continuing evolving the standards, etc. So we came to the conclusion that not only do we need to continue that technical work between the ICT people in the cities and communities, but also we need to get a political momentum going to actually have that we all share the same vision of where we want to go, and not only by cities above 50,000 inhabitants, because we also have smaller cities in the European Union that actually would not be able to have even a conversation about this because they don't have the resources to engage. So why don't we give them, in a way, a free ride on the work that has already been done, so that we don't have that, in a way, the territorial cohesion remains strong also in the European Union, and we don't leave people behind. And that then brought us to the conclusion of the declaration that you mentioned, which is the next slide, I think. Where, yeah, so these were the organizations that said, like, yeah, we need to do something. So we came together and we said, okay, how would that work? You see a number of organizations that you will recognize. I saw that some of the colleagues from the organization of Agile and Smart Cities are here. And by the way, I very much like this word agile in front of smart, because we often like to look at smart, but it's really the agility that we need to adapt to new circumstances like the ones we experience now that will make the cities a living entity that we have. Eurocities, representing some of the medium-sized cities in Europe, and the European Network of Living Labs. We came together, also inspired by the work done in the Digital Transition Partnership, which is an organization that is very strongly linked to the urban the urban dimension of European work, so the regional policy angle. We then were in contact with the council, because if you do this, there's no point in the Commission sitting with cities and then member states feeling excluded. That's not the point. The point is actually to do this at a multi-level governance manner. So also involve the member states and the regions. So we contacted the Finnish presidency, who also had a priority on smart cities, and worked very well together with them. And then also the formal representation of regions and cities in the European Union, the Committee of the Regions. So we really worked together. We said, like, well, how can we bring all of these elements together? And we came then, which is the next slide, to the idea of signing a declaration. Now, when you start, I think we have many declarations. Our politicians sign probably 6, 7 of those declarations a year. So we said it needs to be meaningful. So we need to make sure that the mayors, the regional ministers, the aldermen, sign up to this idea, so that the technical people have a mandate to actually make this work. Because this also requires organizational changes. This requires departments to talk to each other. This requires, let's say, the ICT specialists in the environment department maybe to step back a bit and say, no, I could do it one way, but I prefer to do it the way we all do it. You know, those are organizational changes that will require political leadership. It's for that reason that we have also guides for leaders and those sort of elements that we've made available for city leaders who are not necessarily IT specialists. And we said we need to find a European way of doing this digital transformation in cities and communities. We've been working on this I've been working on this for 30, 40 years. I mean, I've been doing smart cities before the internet. So you can imagine that it was a very different conversation than we have now. And we said, let's get together and do something about it. So what we did, which is then the next slide, I think. Yes. So we first said, well, we need to then say, well, what is really the difference in the European Union? Now, when I say the European Union, we looked at ourselves, how we would wish to do that. I know, having had these conversations with various of my counterparts outside the European Union, that all of these things resonate also very much in Japan, Korea, Brazil, and many other countries. These things resonate. But together we said, well, we need to have a number of principles that we apply when we use these, when we set up these data platforms. Now, I won't read them out to you, but you can see that it comes back to what Fatma just said and what I also mentioned at the introduction. This serves a purpose. It's not to set up nice platforms and IT infrastructures just to amuse ourselves, but it serves a purpose to really service the need of our citizens. and also work with the citizens. That's why a very strong emphasis on the citizen-centric and the city-led approach. I mean, for me, the easiest would be to write a directive and then legislate how cities should set up their platforms. That is, let's say, organizationally the easiest thing to do, but it will have a lot of resistance and it wouldn't be carried. It wouldn't have the commitment of it. So we defined this set of principles, and then we said we need to then develop a number of work streams to make this work. Now, the financial is mentioned first there, but I would first like to mention the technical. We already have a set of technical specifications, but not in terms of very detailed standardization, but a number of guiding principles that you should use. For the colleagues that know OASC, well, I call them the minimum interoperability mechanisms, plus a number of standards used by the one M2M consortium and that sort of thing. So we've put that together to say, like, if you really want to join the family, that's probably where you need to look first, and that's where you need to aim. And again, spyware is a very important part of that set of technical specifications. In the European Union, if you then would like to guide people in that direction, we have a number of financial instruments that we can deploy in the future, which in this particular case will very much rely on also the member states' support for a strong digital Europe program, where we aim to fund all of this, but you can imagine that that will not be sufficient to cover all 80,000 municipalities in the European Union, and that's not going to work. So we need to find mechanisms either through national money or through the European Regional Development Fund to find co-financing to do this together. So we would also call upon you to make your own money available for your own good, but in a way that actually brings Europe together and makes you join that European family. Then we will discuss whether the legal framework in the European Union is sufficient, or whether things need to be modified, changed, do we need new elements. We would focus very much on the education and capacity building in the cities, because these things require a little bit of knowledge of how to operate this, and part of putting that together is also sharing it so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. And then we need to look, I'm sorry about all the typos, it was a quick fix, it was a translation from French, it's my fault. But we will look at measuring and the monitoring, like what is our benchmark and how can we actually see that we have improved, where we will develop, and the Committee of the Regions is in the lead on that, some statistics on how to manage it. So that is really the action that we have in mind. Yes, I see a question coming up in the chat from why is it only on cities, the 300 million, and not also for the rural areas, as well as regional governments, so covering the whole union. Actually, that is probably, I presented it wrong, because that is precisely what we're doing. My cities is short for cities and communities, and that very much covers also the communities of 7,000 who cannot necessarily afford themselves a lot of a human capacity there. And that is also why I said that all the levels of government are involved. This declaration that I speak of has also been signed by a number of member states. Some member states feel less comfortable signing this, which is fine, but particularly Estonia, Finland, and I think the Netherlands didn't sign yet. But I think there's a third country, I've forgotten now which one it is, and also regions. There's a regional digital minister in Hessen, for example, who's very much a supporter of this, who also spoke in Porto on the subject. So it is a multi-level governance where we want to make sure that all European citizens can benefit from this initiative. So very good question. When I say cities, I mean smart cities and communities. Yeah. So the next slide. It's basically the closing of what I would like to do. We have for the moment around 70 cities that signed, and congratulations to Amersfoort, who was amongst one of the first 3 in the Netherlands. And the first 3 weren't actually the big cities that we normally see in this exercise, but they signed. We will gradually now build up the capacity, and what we are doing now is to make this meaningful. As I said, our politicians sign various declarations, but in the end, we move on to the next declaration. So what I'm doing now is with these 70 cities, and I hope they will grow to, let's say, represent thousands in Europe. We have set up a network where we will actually give all of this meaning. What does it mean to say we need finance? How do we do it? How do we need to get into further detail of the technical specification? So those work streams will start next week, the week of the the week after, the week of the 11th of May. We will have conversations, and on the 18th of June, I will see also via a seminar like this all the 70 signatories again to see, are we on track, and what do you expect from this declaration, and how can we bring this forward together? Just as a closing, it's also very different for me, to be very honest. I've been a commission official for 30 years, and our tradition is to have spending programs, calls, directives that we negotiate. That's a more traditional mechanism. This is really a new form of engaging with cities. Now, ideally, we would engage with citizens, but you can imagine how difficult it would be for me to engage with 440 million citizens in one go. But the cities provide that interface of being able to communicate to them directly, but also at the same time, them having a very good grasp of what their citizens really desire in terms of the services. So it's a very new way of working where we position ourselves in the middle of all the others, not above, if you see what I mean. And that is something that is new, quite challenging as well in terms of the way it works, because it doesn't follow traditional commission procedures and patterns. But I must say, so far, the experience has been very good, and I've enjoyed working with all of you. I think we then come to the last, is that correct? I just give you the details. So that is actually a clickable link. So if you get it in PDF, you can click on it, you can come to the website. Now, for the European cities represented today, I can only say, please join. Please join doing this. You can sign up or ask your mayor to do this. It's an administrative procedure, but then you will be in the conversation. We have also opened up the possibility for what we call the sponsors or supporters of this, because there's also private sector members, cities outside the European Union that say, well, actually, we like this. We would like to mark the fact that we like this initiative. So there's a sort of sponsor page where you can register your support for this. So there's even a little button if you are an individual where you can give it what we call a citizens like. Now, we haven't got the 440 million citizens likes that we desire, but I just pointed out to you, it's a little gadget. It's not an important one, but I think what is important is it signals the wish of us as a commission, but also of our partners to do this together with and for the citizens. I pick up finally on a question on the private sector in this.
But Eddy, before we go there, we have to say a warm thank you to you, and we do that by toasting, because this originally started as an online borrel, as we call it in Holland. So I understood you have some orange bitter.
Yeah, I have a special bottle, which is 40 years old, which dates from the transition from Queen Juliana to Queen Beatrix, which I've kept in the cupboard for a long time. But because this was a very special national day for the Netherlands, which we hope we will never experience again, we did a national toast on our balconies, our terraces, and our gardens. And I opened that bottle with my family. So let me use that to bring out a toast to all the citizens in the European cities. And I hope that we can continue this pathway forward together.
Proost.
Proost. Launcher.
And then we have another little tradition. We started this, and that's that. I would like to ask Lotte to ask the first question to you, and then we do the Q&A in the chat with you. So Lotte, you're from the Ministry, from the Urban Agenda. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Hartog, for your presentation. I was wondering, there are loads of initiatives that have been already been conducted in this area, and how do you deal with the front runners and the cities that are already accustomed to this conversation, and how to deal then with the big spread of people that are you're trying to engage in this initiative?
This is precisely the question that Commissioner Gabriel asked us. She said, well, why do we do this? Because what we do is too small to cover all the small communities and municipalities. And the big ones don't really need the European Commission to become smart. And that is true. We are at different levels. And that is also why the exercise that we are now designing, and that is the discussion we have in the technical working group, to say, like, well, what do we need to do? There will be cities that, if they look at them, and if you look at the analysis from the Erasmus University, will say, well, actually, thank you very much. We're already doing this, and we're fine doing this. So we don't need extra. There will be cities that said, well, actually, we were doing smart cities and urban data platforms, but we now discover that maybe we weren't doing it the right way. We are actually now locked into vendors, or we have a few problems that it opens our eyes. So even if they're advanced, they might want to change CAP. There will be cities that have started engaging, and they say, okay, now we have a sense of direction, and we would like to co-invest with you. There will also be municipalities, particularly in rural areas, who said, like, yeah, we know that this is coming, but to be very honest, it's daunting, and we're afraid of it, and we're looking at the closest big city to help us, that would say, well, actually, this gives us an opportunity to join the European bandwagon. So cities will be at different levels, and that is why we need to make sure that the assistance that we provide is tailored to the individual need of each of the cities.
Okay, thank you so much. Is that an answer to your question, Lotte?
Yes, it is. And at the same time, I think that the cities that were already engaged, maybe they know answers to questions that are coming in the near future. So how do you try to use their experience already?
Well, first of all, and then I piggyback as well on the question about the combination of cities and private sector. This doesn't come drop from the air. This is not something that we invented ourselves within the European Commission. This comes really from the conclusion of the Infrastructures Action Cluster of the European Innovation Partnership, and that European Innovation Partnership on smart cities and community had both on the supply side and the demand side people working together. So if you look at the role of OASC, they've also been very much bringing those various elements together. And within those organizations, you find a lot of leading cities. And we started this declaration in Oulu, and then we went to Porto, and both of them are actually cities that are well advanced in terms of the digital transition of their city. So that is what we really want to use. That's also why we didn't say, why don't we write the legislation for them and then impose, and then find that it doesn't fit on the ones that are already leading. You know, as a government, you would be running behind the technology often. You need to make sure that it is a flexible instrument that actually benefits and piggybacks on the good work already done by a lot of European cities.
Okay, thank you. Last week we had a presentation from one of the master planners of the city of Busan in South Korea, and what I got from that presentation is that they have a very strong top-down vision. How do you know that this European approach brings us better results than that more national approach, so to say?
Yeah. Well, the first question is, would we be able to do it the way they do it? Would you accept it? I'm not sure. I'm not sure that all communities in the European Union would accept the ukase from the European Union government, even from
so in a way, it's a no-go, you say?
I think that's not the European way of doing things. In China, yes, I mean, you only need the president to decide. If the president says, I use that standard, everyone is obliged to use that standard. If our president says that, let's say we have a long path ahead to make it. So, but apart from the fact that our culture is different, I also think it is much stronger. It's more difficult, it's slower, but it's also much stronger when it bites, when it holds, to do this together and get the ownership of the process. So we've invested a lot of time and energy in getting the ownership of the process, and that is why it's not a European Commission only process. We put efforts into it, but OASC, Eurocities, the Dutch Association of Municipalities have put enormous resources into it because they felt it was useful for what they were doing, not because I told them to do so. And that is really the power that you will see in the end of this exercise. It will be 2-3 years, it won't be quick, but then it holds, and it's the Dutch word. I mean,
Okay.
for the non-Dutch speaker, the word beklijven. You know, you can direct people, but it doesn't stick, and that is really what we're trying to do with this exercise. So I don't think we would be able to do it the way the others do it, and I do think that it's actually better to do it our way, but it requires more effort and it will take long.
So, okay, and then one question with two questions. If you are a city or if or a local community, or if you are a company, how can you benefit most from it? So so for example, I'm the city of Deventer, or I'm a company here in the city of Deventer. How can I benefit most of this approach? Very, very practical answer, please.
Yep. First of all, you find a sense of travel. So you do not have to ask as a mayor to your only or your three IT people, could you please design an system for you? You have a direction of travel that you can get from somewhere else, saves in human resources. You will be able to get some, if you participate in the EU project, some money from the EU, because that's the idea, that we will leverage funding through EU funding. So you will get more money. And you will get it cheaper, because if the city of Deventer goes to the market, it will pay more than if the whole of the Netherlands or the whole of Europe go to the market. So those are the three benefits that we see for this exercise for the city.
Okay, thank you. Then go to the chat box, and if you have more questions, people, please write them down, and you will get to them at the end. There is a question from Laurens, and he says, in a perfect situation, should the digital twin / dashboard always be one dashboard, or should it specific per subject?
Could you repeat it? I'm just looking for this. Could a digital twin?
Yeah, so the question was at 324, and it's asked, in a perfect situation, should the digital twin / dashboard always be one dashboard, or should it specific per subject?
The honest truth is I can't give you the answer. I'm not an IT engineer, so I can't give you the answer. What I've understood from the work that is being done, that actually a one-size-fits-all solution is not necessarily the best solution for an overall ecosystem of a smart city.
Okay. Thank you. And please, Mustafa, can you mute? Yeah, okay, right. Then I scroll down, and you already answered the question from Jan Roest.
And you will see that Graziana, my colleague, has put some of the links into the chat box as well, so that you can find the links there and some of the details.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And people, if you want to, you can download your chat box before logging out. You can download it by in the top somewhere. Just by save. I have a question from Max, and it said, I think it's a great initiative to have one urban data platform. How do you assure it will work? And how can we support? So Max, maybe you can explain what you mean by we, because that can be a lot.
Yeah, I immediately also take the last question coming in from John about open source technology. Again, it is
Right.
not the commission that's going to decide that it works or not. This is really the work that has been done through the OASC as well, with the minimum interoperability mechanism. I think that is a funding stone, or the one M2M standardization work that's being done. It goes beyond my understanding, in technical terms of what this is. Again, I've asked the same question, does it require only open source or not? Open source is always a good one, but certain solutions are by definition not open source, because you need certain restrictions on this. So, but I think the same principles that you've applied to Fireware would apply to the solutions that we have found here. It's a whole technical discussion that is taking place. I don't know whether it's any of the colleagues from the OASC that could come in and explain a little bit better how this works technically.
But do you mean that by fiber and by those other platforms, we also reinvent what democracy means in Europe, in a way?
Oh, that's a big statement.
Isn't it?
I'm
No,
not sure that the technology dictates what democracy means. I think it should be the other way around. I think probably the solutions that we offer allow for different forms of democracy. Let's put it that way.
Okay, thank you. And then there's the other question from Max, and maybe he can Max, maybe you can say what you mean by that. Is how can we support? So, what do you mean by we?
Well, first of all, the question is, I think it's a good initiative, but how is the EU going to assure that this initiative is going to work? And secondly, how can we also, as private sector in Holland, advisors support this initiative?
Okay, yeah, it's good to define the we. Mostly we've talked, this has really been to bring the cities together on the demand side. As I said, it comes from supply and demand side. This is not very different. I don't know whether you're familiar with the TM Forum, which is much more on the, well, if you looked it up, TM Forum, they also have principles, design principles of these platforms, and that is much more from the telecom operators. And it goes into the same direction. If both on the supply side and the demand side, we would say, well, actually, there's a piece of cake for everyone. There's something that we can work from. The specifications are by definition done actually mostly by the private sector, so mostly by the supply side because they engineer the products and services. But there also the cities play a role in defining what they need, so that we actually, for example, we avoid that vendor lock-in. So where you can help is actually to work with the cities to actually make them design the data platforms in the way that we have specified in the principle. There is
Max, is that something you can work on?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great idea to come up with one kind of platform so that cities can really leverage on each other's data and making sure that all of the other solutions are going to be easier, like the mobility solutions, etc. Yeah, it's definitely something we should bring in our advice practice.
Okay, thank you. A question from the US. How active is the private sector helping push the smart city digital transformation in, I guess, your opinion, Eddy?
Yeah, okay, that's not necessarily linked to this specific exercise that we were discussing.
No, it's more broadly meant, I guess.
But more broadly, to be honest, we have a very vibrant and very active private sector in this. I must say, almost every seminar I discover 2 or 3 solutions that I think like, why don't we have that European level? I'll give you one example. There's a city in Finland, I've forgotten the name. It's not a big city. They are the city of culture. I've forgotten the name. I apologize for the city, but they developed as part of the city of culture an app where you can trace your own CO2 consumption as a private individual, and then you can create a market with it. So if you've been taking the bike, you get credits, and if you've been taking the car all week, you have to pay back next week. I mean, it is such a visual thing that you would have in mind, but I think like that is a fantastic thing developed by the private sector, used by the public sector. You find that the technology, the gadgets that are being developed in Europe are enormous. If you look at the interaction between the energy mobility sector, the Dutch people will know Lombok's-net, for example, fantastic project. The problem in Europe is always that it doesn't scale. We think Amersfoort, and then we say, well, maybe the province of Utrecht, and by the time we think of the Netherlands, it's gone because one of the bigger companies has gone.
And is that in your opinion different in bigger countries, or is that an idea we have about, let's say, the US or China?
I think it is different. Ask the scale-up sector. They say, well, we invented in Europe. If we then scale up, we first go to the United States, Brazil, India, a country where we can develop critical mass, and then we come back into Europe to launch it over all the cities. That is really one of the problems that we have in Europe, is to scale quickly.
Okay. Thank you. Before we go on with the questions, it's 4 o'clock in this part of the world, so 1 hour is over. We just go on with some questions till the end, but I can imagine that people have to leave to go to Zoom or to Teams or to another WebEx meeting. That's live these days. So Eddy, I would like to thank you again, and I would like also to thank all the people who are in this WebEx who've joined us. Thank you very much. And next week we will fly to India, and we will do that in the morning because of the time difference. So you can join us as well. I mean, when you're from the US, it's a little early, but nevertheless. The discussion was going on this one because there came a reply, and I would like to read it to you as well. Lauren said, should the private sector push a smart city or only facilitate the wishes from the municipality? The private sector is not in the lead. What's your response to that? I think this asks more. This is more something to respond on than
Yeah,
to
I'm not sure what to respond on that, to be honest.
yeah. Well, let's go on then. There's a question about.
Before you go on, Jan-Willem, I wanted to alert people to also what Leia is contributing. Thank you, Leia, from OASC also on some of the. She's completed some of the answers that I've given. That is very useful.
Yeah, and we will share that at our website as well, and send it in the aftermail, so people can go there. There's a question about citizen-centric. Gij Bos says it's very interesting. Biases, inclusivity and diversity are very important in the base. Can the European Commission safeguard and promote that?
Well, I think in our talk we always promote that, but we also with this declaration, that's why it's at the heart of this declaration, we also give an indication as to how we, and not only the Commission, but also our partners think that it should be designed. I mean, the principles really reflect some of the European values that we have on how to operate with our citizens, how to also safeguard privacy, for example, which is a big thing in Europe. But I think it also indicates a new path of wanting to work with citizens. You know, we have, again, it's another topic for another conversation of citizens labs and how do the living labs work, for example. You know, so that is also, I think, a typical European concept that we have exploited already.
We have to do that in another webinar, you mean?
I think there's plenty of topics that you can have in other webinars, exactly. And not necessarily me in the lead. I mean, plenty of our partners, I mean, OSC, NO, I mean, they would be better placed to present this to you.
We have to talk on that. That's a very good idea. I see another question. Yeah, open source, you already got onto that, but there's also a question from Tracy. Who says, so when someone signs the declaration, do you provide specific resources to develop their digital plan / data guidelines? You spoke about helping them leverage funding and accessing more experts, but can you explain a bit deeper your role in facilitating this and in monitoring the progress of the declarees?
Yeah, but I'll be very brief. First of all, this is to point the people in the same direction. That is already assistance that we provide, so to bring the noses in the same direction. In order to stimulate that we actually do the investment, we will have small money available. We're looking at about 200 million for the Digital Europe program over 7 years. So that's really small money. But member states have money themselves that they spend on European urban data platforms, for example, through the regional development fund that they could spend. So we want to leverage that. And then the next thing is that we would like to give also the how do you call it, the collective market power, if you like, to there. So that those are the advantages I think that we can
Okay, thank you. And that's also something you can find at the website, right?
Well, the website is very much focused on the declaration. I mean, we are still developing our financial instruments, but also there's other instruments. We have the research instruments that will come on stream. Some of you will have heard of the Intelligent Cities Challenge that is now ongoing, which also is much more focused on cities providing the right environment for business to innovate. You know, it's slightly different angles, but very complementary and very tuned into what I've just said. I haven't mentioned the digital innovation hubs. We had a 2-hour seminar this morning on what digital innovation hubs can do for cities. With various speakers, I've been listening from 11 to 1 this morning to that. Also very powerful what we can do. So we do deploy various instruments at the European Union level. 2 things. This is meant to bring the nose in the right direction. Second, at the European level, we will never be able to ask for the money to member states to cover all the data platforms in cities. We can federate, we can facilitate, but we will not be able to fund all.
So in that, what is or what are some of the biggest challenges you're facing? So, yeah, what do you have to solve to make?
I think it's mindset, not reinventing the wheel, looking at the board across the borders, and rather than just doing that through good practices and implement it if we like, and if we don't like, we do something else. But really to have that state of mind to say, like, no. Sometimes maybe we have to compromise on our personal thing. You know, if you're an expert at something, you say this is the best way to do it. Sometimes you need to compromise to do it collectively.
But that's also something which every industrial revolution brings with it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's also why it's important that this is done bottom up. We can't invent the best solutions. That needs to, in a way, grow on you. You know, what we thought was the best solution 5 years ago may not be the best solution now. That evolves as well. That's why we need to make it really a living environment.
Yeah, so for the Dutch people, that's also something we try to do with that city deal where I told you briefly about making those wheels and then just once, inventing those wheels just once. Go on for more questions. There is an invitation to go to the website from Leah. That's nice. Thank you so much. And another interesting website, we will all put them on the website afterwards. Yeah, a question from Jan Roest, responding to the discussion about scaling and going to Brazil. Why do you think we can't scale up in Europe?
I think it's mindset and finance. Mindset, I give you an example, not to do with cities. Some of you, the Dutch people, will know what a tikkie is. Yeah, it's just a way to pass money from you to your neighbor via telephone. I have a Dutch bank account and I cannot do tikkie. And you know why? Because I do not have a telephone number that has an 06 in it. It's stupid. Why can I not do that with a Belgian telephone number? It's completely unreal to me, but that is the mindset of a Dutch bank who's supposed to be international. So it's a mindset that you see all over Europe. I think if you have American friends there, they would think that anything that they can deploy in California, they can do in the state of New York. I mean, so the mindset is different. The financing is different. We have less financing and it is more conservative. And that is really a problem in terms of the scaling up. And I think there you need to ask Constantine for advice. I think he's on a daily basis confronted with that.
Yeah, he's the scaling prince, isn't he?
Exactly.
Then there are some greetings from all over the world and thank yous for you. That's nice by WebEx that everybody says.
Absolutely.
Yeah, everybody's very polite. Yeah, those were the questions. Thank you so much, Eddy.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. And I really hope that I will get a lot of more Dutch cities next week registering their signature on the website. But if you have issues, you don't hesitate to call. Graziana is also on this call, maybe some of the other colleagues. Leah from OAC can help you, but don't hesitate to call us if you have any further issues.